Welcome back. Today I want to talk about student anxiety. I'm going to cover what's real, what's misunderstood, and what adults often get wrong. So, there are usually two camps of people who cover this subject. One of them will say that there's a mental health crisis going on, and the other will brush it off and say this is just a generation that can't handle pressure. The truth of the matter is, neither of them are right, and it's not that simple. I've been a classroom teacher for over 20 years. I've done it in multiple states and multiple countries. They all have different communities, yet they keep showing the same trends. Students are reporting higher anxiety now than in past years. Before anybody gets too emotional, let's go ahead and break this down. First, let's talk about what's real. As someone who has a master's in psychology and actively teaches the subject, I have to tell you anxiety is real. Looking at our neurological processes, our brains control our entire body. So when someone's experiencing anxiety, it has a direct physical effect on us. When a student says they're anxious, that doesn't mean that they're being dramatic. Anxiety activates the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center. Our heart rate will increase, our cortisol levels will rise, and our focus tends to narrow. We are literally pre programmed to go into fight or flight mode. And when cortisol levels stay elevated over a long period of time, our baseline stress increases. Our baseline stress, by the way, is what we consider normal. But when normal is brought up to another level by external factors, our usual daily coping skills and our ability to handle the daily stress no longer work. We need something else. Now, today's students get an extra layer on top of this. The constant digital comparison I spoke of in my past videos, the academic competition, people's public social identity, and the concern over how they're perceived. Then we have a 24-hour news cycle that seems dedicated to fear and outrage. And for our high school students, the pressures of college can start as early as age 13. That's the definition of living in a sustained stress environment. Of course, their anxiety increases and our brains respond to our environment. It's biology, not weakness. Now, let's look at what's misunderstood. Here's where things get a little tricky. From a psychological point of view, not all discomfort is anxiety. Nervousness before a test, that's basic. It's a normal reaction. It's okay. Being uncomfortable speaking in front of your class, eh, that's also normal. It's okay. Becoming upset about a grade, yep, normal again. See, people have a tendency to pathologize normal developmental stress as being something more. Stress is not the enemy. People require stress in order to grow. Some parents attempt to remove as much stress as possible, and they will clear all the obstacles they can for their children. But in doing so, they don't realize that they're actually robbing their students of opportunities, namely, the opportunity to struggle and overcome, to develop strength of character. In a word, to build resilience. None of these examples are the problem. The problem is when it's chronic, when it's unmanaged stress, which needs to be fixed. There is a difference. And if we label every uncomfortable emotion as anxiety, then we accidentally teach our students that discomfort equals danger. Discomfort is part of growth, and we need to understand that. So that brings me to what adults often get wrong. And the number one thing we get wrong is that we compare our experiences, or at least what we remember of them, to theirs. We say things like, well, I had it harder back in my day. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But our hardship didn't include the same things that theirs does. They have a unique experience from ours. As I've said, they are living in a time where they're creating a permanent digital footprint. Those social metrics are attached to their identity. There is a global comparison at scale at every level, from the state of the country and the GDP to who gets to attend college, and even what is someone else wearing, watching, or listening to halfway across the world. They also have instant academic tracking. For us, back in the time of Gen X, a few people saw us do dumb things. Maybe a couple more people heard about it. But after a little while, the embarrassment faded. People moved on, and there was no record of it. For today's kids, their goof ups, their mistakes, they can live forever. That changes the nervous system. We can't compare ourselves and expect identical outcomes. People in general tend to swing between extremes. Some adults will minimize issues. They'll say, "You're fine, toughen up." Others catastrophize things and say, "Oh no, this is trauma." Both of these extremes end up missing the middle. We need to be realistic. Students need validation, but they don't need exaggeration. If they see it as exaggeration, then they will reject the entire message. It's a far better thing to say things like, "I see you're stressed. Maybe we can work through it together." Or, "You can handle this, but if you need me, I'm right here." This calm acknowledgement helps them to build resilience, but panic, especially from adults, doesn't help anyone. Think about the early stage development when little kids are first learning how to walk. They may fall down. Heck, they probably fall down all the time. But they always look to their parents to figure out whether or not they're seriously injured. And the parents who initially start off by jumping up and panicking over the child, they end up causing the child to cry. They will usually look to the parent to see how afraid they should be for their own well being and their safety. They look for that parent's acknowledgement. And if they say, "Ooh, hey, you took a big tumble," well, then the kid realizes, "Oh, yeah, I did, but I'm okay. There's nothing life threatening or dangerous." So they get up and they keep going. And that's a big lesson right there from an early age. Now, if we move inside the classroom, let me paint you a picture of what anxiety might look like in real time. A student could freeze up on a test that they know that they studied for. A high achiever could spiral over a 92. A student might try to avoid participation because they fear public embarrassment. Another student might check their phone repeatedly, not for fun, they're not playing games, but for reassurance. Sometimes anxiety shows up as perfectionism, sometimes as procrastination. It can come out as irritability, or it can be the thing that shuts a student down. It's not always dramatic. In fact, often it's quiet. So we have to acknowledge that there's a social media layer as well. And social media can amplify the comparisons that these students are looking at. They compare the threat response from what other people are experiencing. Think about a teenager scrolling. They're not really consuming content so much as they're measuring themselves against it. From the curated success of others, because most people only tell the good things, and the filtered beauty all splash across their highlight reels, their brains are automatically starting to register their own social ranking. See, humans, like most animals, are wired to belong. They want to be part of the pack. If their belonging to a group feels threatened, then their anxiety rises. That's evolutionary psychology. It's not fragility. The balance that we need to find moving forward comes from two areas. First, we need to take the anxiety seriously. Second, we need to teach students that they're capable of navigating discomfort. Because here's the risk. If we overprotect students from stress, they don't build coping skills. And if we dismiss the stress, they don't feel supported. Resilience is only built through supported struggle, not avoidance and not ridicule, supported struggle. When it comes to the leadership role that we hold, and I mean parents and teachers alike, adults set the tone. If a student is anxious and the adult escalates the situation, the nervous system will spike further. If the adult stays calm and regulated, the student borrows that regulation. And neuroscience backs this up. Calmness is contagious, but so is panic. If we want anxious students to stabilize, then we have to model that stability. To give you a Gen X reflection, I'll admit that we didn't talk much about anxiety growing up. In fact, my parents never mentioned it. And I don't think I ever heard a teacher say anything about anxiety, except perhaps in my senior year of high school. I had a psychology teacher named Mr. Robakowski. Thing is, just because the word anxiety didn't pass our lips, that didn't mean it wasn't there. It simply meant that we didn't have the language to discuss it. Today's students have that language, and that's a good thing. But language alone is not a skill. It's not enough to simply describe it. We still need to teach them how to cope with it. Now, we can use breathing regulation. They could learn better time management. A lot of them need to embrace failure recovery. And most of all, people of all ages need to adjust their perspective. When we combine emotional vocabulary plus coping strategies, that's power. That's when we will be able to see success. So, here's a question. Are students really more fragile? Or are they navigating more stimuli, more visibility, and more evaluation than we ever did? As I said, anxiety is not weakness. It's a nervous system response to a perceived threat. The job of adults is not to eliminate that threat, certainly not every threat. Our job is to help students calibrate which threats are real and how to move through them. Because adulthood will not remove pressure, but we can help prepare them to handle it. Next time we talk, I want to go through a little bit more on Gen X versus today. Until then, before dismissing a student's anxiety, ask, are we teaching them how to cope? Or are we just telling them to cope? That difference matters. Welcome to the conversation.